In the frozen silence of January 1945, the war in Europe was reaching its brutal peak. Entire towns were crushed, forests were graveyards of steel, and the German army, cornered, desperate and deadly, was fighting with a ferocity that shocked even hardened veterans. But in one tiny corner of France, something happened that historians still struggle to believe. A moment when one soldier, just 19 years old, turned himself into a one-man army. His name was Audie Murphy. It was January 26, 1945, near the French village of Holzweiler. The weather was bitter cold, snow swallowing everything. Murphy and the men of the 3rd Infantry Division were exhausted. They'd fought through Sicily, Italy, and France. Many hadn't slept in days. Murphy, barely 5'5" and weighing little more than a boy, had already earned a reputation for courage far beyond his size. But what he was about to do would become one of the most legendary actions in U.S. military history. The day began with a distant rumble, metal tracks grinding frozen ground, engines humming like approaching thunder. German armor. Through the trees, 2 Panther tanks appeared. Behind them came dozens of infantry, well-armed, coordinated, moving fast. Murphy's unit was outnumbered, low on ammunition, and had just lost their company commander. If they stayed in place, they would be crushed. Murphy made a decision in seconds. He ordered his men to fall back to the woods to regroup and form a defensive line. But he stayed forward, alone. In front of him was a single American tank destroyer, an M10 Wolverine, that had already been hit and was burning. Thick black smoke poured from its engine. Ammunition inside could explode at any moment. To any sane person, that machine was a death trap. To Murphy, it was the only chance. He ran toward the fire. Flames licked the sides, the air shimmered with heat. He climbed onto the burning tank destroyer, ignoring the risk of explosion, ignoring the bullets beginning to crack around him. On top was a mounted .50 caliber M2 Browning machine gun, the kind that can tear through vehicles, walls, and anything soft enough to bleed. Murphy gripped the handles, took a breath, and pulled the trigger. The battlefield erupted. The .50 cal roared like thunder, the recoil shaking the entire turret. Shell casings flew out in a golden fountain. Germans advancing across the field were suddenly pinned in place. Murphy fired with deadly accuracy, cutting down infantry squads, stopping flanking attempts, destroying machine gun nests before they could even settle into position. One man versus an entire company, and the company was losing. German soldiers shifted their focus entirely on him. Rifles cracked, machine guns rattled, bullets tore into the metal around his legs. Yet Murphy stayed exposed on that turret, firing non-stop. Witnesses said he looked like he had become part of the machine. Calm, relentless, unstoppable. A group of Germans crawled through a ditch, trying to get close enough to throw grenades. Murphy spotted them instantly. He swung the heavy barrel down and shredded the entire squad in seconds. Another group tried to bring up an anti-tank gun to blast him off the turret. Murphy mowed them down before they could fire a single shot. At one point, artillery shells detonated so close that smoke and dirt blasted into his face, but he wiped his eyes and kept firing. He was bleeding, frostbitten, exhausted, yet determined to hold the line alone. And then the tank destroyer beneath him exploded. Flames had reached the fuel supply, triggering a violent blast that rocked the vehicle. The shockwave could have thrown him off, but Murphy held on, still firing, still holding off the attack. German troops hesitated, stunned that the blast hadn't killed him. In that moment of confusion, Murphy grabbed his field radio, shouting coordinates to U.S. artillery while continuing to fire the .50 cal with his free hand. Artillery shells began slamming into the field, turning the German advance into chaos. Despite the explosions, despite the incoming fire that shredded tree branches above him, Murphy guided every strike with pinpoint accuracy. When the Germans pushed again, Murphy refused to abandon his position. He fought until the 50 cal ran dry. Only then, after almost an hour of standing alone against an entire company, did he finally jump off the burning wreck and limp back toward his men, his clothes torn, his leg bleeding, his face blackened with smoke. But he wasn't done. As the Germans regrouped for one final push, Murphy gathered his squad and launched a counterattack. Fueled by the courage they'd just witnessed, the men surged forward, driving the Germans back through the woods and securing the position completely. What should have been a German breakthrough became a decisive American victory, all because one soldier refused to retreat. When the battlefield finally went quiet, Murphy collapsed. His men later said he barely spoke. He simply sat in the snow, exhausted beyond understanding. The only proof of what he had just done lay across the field. Dozens of German soldiers, multiple destroyed positions, stalled tanks, and an entire company forced into retreat. For his actions, Murphy received the Medal of Honor. The official citation described his bravery in polished military language, but the soldiers who were there told it differently. They said he became something superhuman, that he fought like a man who had already accepted death and then chose to outrun it. They said that by standing alone, he saved every man behind him. In France, near Holzwihr, there is a granite marker that stands where Murphy made his stand. Visitors still walk the quiet forest road, look at the frozen farmland, and try to imagine a teenager climbing onto a burning tank destroyer to fight hundreds alone. It remains one of the most incredible true acts of courage in military history. An act that turned a battle, saved a company, and carved the legend of Audie Murphy into the story of World War II forever.